Hi, my name is Larry Thompson, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on emergency equipment and survival gear. So here are a couple of things that are going to be discussed throughout this video. First is going to be the FAA regulations on emergency equipment, maintenance, and overwater operations. Then I'm going to go into the general pilot, emergency preparedness, equipment, and things that you need to know based on just general aviation. And then I'm going to go to overwater operations, equipment maintenance, and then give you the last couple of tidbits that you need to know and additional information that you can have to help out. So let's start off with FAA regulations. The FAR 91-513 emergency equipment basically discusses everything that a pilot, just for general aviation, general procedures, flight plans, should have aboard, they need to have on board in order to fly. When you go to 509, you're talking about overwater operations specifically, and there are a couple of things that are very, well, there's a lot of things that are very different with overwater operations, excuse me. And then 409 basically just talks with the inspections and maintenance that we have already heard several times, but will continue to be brought up with the emergency equipment that we fly and use. So I'm going to talk about emergency preparedness right now. Emergencies, they can and they will happen. It's always just best to be prepared for everything that could happen and just have all the different equipment that we need in aviation. So, for the necessary items that we need to fly as pilots for general aviations are basically just these couple of things here. You need a hand fire extinguisher, something you can use to extinguish whatever type of fires you have going on, whether it's electrical, chemical, whatever. You need to have that specific type of fire extinguisher on board and available for everybody on board to use. You also need a first aid kit. This is for minor things like paper cuts to a little bit bigger things like an actual cut in an arm or a finger or something like that. Not talking about like amputations or anything like that. We're just talking about more of the minor ones and things that could happen in case of a crash or some type of emergency situation. For those that have 19 passengers or more, you need a crash axe, so to bust down windows, doors, whatever you need to get out in case you are trapped inside, as well as a megaphone to be able to communicate effectively with everybody on board. Also, we as pilots need to have an ELT, and that stands for Emergency Locator Transmitter. This is a device that basically emits a distinctive audio tone at 121.5 megahertz VHF and 243 megahertz UHF. It just gives locations and a whole bunch of other little things that the search and rescue teams, SAR, need in order to find you in case of an emergency. We also, with this ELT, it needs to operate continuously for at least 48 hours, over a wide. So we're talking about freezing colds to the middle of the desert and burning up, just so that people can find you. And overwater operations, these are very specific and they have a lot of things. You can actually look them up further, and I believe it's the 513, FAR 91-513. For overwater flights, pilots must have FAA-approved flotation gear for flying more than 50 nautical miles from the near shore. And to put this in a little bit of easier terms for you, is 30 minutes from the shore. The shore is when the water goes past the high water mark and is not between any islands or the water level changes. This is something that's standard across that area. And anything past that is considered the end of the shore, and that's where these 30 minutes or 50 nautical miles comes into effect. You also need life preservers or flotation devices, enough for each occupant or just enough to get everybody aboard these flotation devices like that. And for the life preserver, they need to have a survivor locator light on top of it. equipment and maintenance. So this is basically just everything that you need to keep your gear working and operating functionally. It goes up under the FAR 91409, and basically it's the same thing we've heard before, where you need to make sure everything's been inspected, it's marked accordingly, and it's ready to be used in each service. If it is in a container, the container needs to be marked to where it is and the last date of inspection. Just keeping up with those things allows you to have these emergency equipment devices aboard. So here are a couple things that you need to know in case of your emergency situation that you may come across. So first thing, more than one emergency can and will happen occasionally. When you're filing a flight plan, if you don't end up in your final destination on time or around the time and there hasn't been any contact, the search and rescue team and procedures will be put into effect, and they will go ahead and try to find you from your last location. So in order for them to find you, make sure your ELT has been activated. So in case of a crash and your ELT is not activated, you need to go ahead and activate that ELT so that you can go ahead and use that. ELT, again, is Emergency Locator Transmitter. Another one of the main parts is that use everything that you have in your survival gear. And you are the most important and beneficial survival gear, I guess you could put it as, or tool on board. So use common sense and be creative whenever you need to survive if needed. And if you want to look at more for overwater operations or survival equipment, you can look below at the FAR 135.167 or the AIM 6-2-70. So the things that you should have learned throughout this video are, first, we're talking about the FAA regulations that required for certain emergency equipment. We go into what ELTs are and how they're used. And then we also go into do pilots need flotation gear? Answer is yes. And then how should pilots maintain this equipment? And that's all up under the FAR 91.409. Thank you for watching this video. Just remember, just don't get stuck up a creek without a paddle, Don't get stuck up a creek without a paddle, because many things can happen at once, and you just need to be prepared for everything that could go wrong. Thank you again. Have a great day.